Yeah, there we go. Once again, we're in Helsinki. We're still here, and it's still the Photo Festival 2021. I'm still Curt. Tonight we have with us 4 of the photographers who were showcased in the festival: Anna, Cletus, and Alex. And we have a new guest with us. Can you join us? Nice to see you. Somebody's dog has joined us in the street. The festival has been going on now for several years. I've been a juror. It was an incredible selection from this year's submissions. I can't remember, I believe it was over 5,000 photographs total. And it's been remarkable to be involved with it. It's a great event. Photographs are displayed throughout Helsinki, and it's been a huge success. As a photographer, I always appreciate it when someone makes an effort to create an audience, and Rafael, the artistic director, has done a terrific job of doing just that. The discussion is really, will follow the 3 different photographers we have with us tonight. I guess, Anna, you're up first. You'll be 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for question and answer, during which time the screen will be filled with your images, and I guess then perhaps you will then talk, tell us something about them or whatever you'd like to say regarding your work. And Cletus, and then Alex, your Britain brings up the rear. So I think that's probably enough of a delay and an introduction. So Anna, if you're ready,
Yes.
Laura, can we switch over to the image? Thank you all for being here. It's certainly exciting.
All right.
Go ahead, Ed. It's all yours.
I will share my screen now. Oh, wait a second. No. Oh. Oh no. What happens now? Okay, I'm already. Okay, something's not working. Although, stop screen. I think like this. All right, now I'm ready. Sorry. So I'm going to tell a little bit about myself and photography, my selected projects, some of them that led me to the one that I'm exhibiting at the Helsinki Festival, some publications, and then of course there's time for questions. Briefly to start where my background comes from, I actually always liked to take pictures since I was a child. But then I decided to, after being in Denmark for a while on some day schools, learning something about photography, I went to Germany to study at the Folkwang University of Arts in Essen with my professor Artsakh, who was from the Becher School. You can see on the pictures too, it's a very industrial area, and you might know the whole German Becher vibes. What I took from there and what kind of inspired me for my later work was how to make a photograph work formally in terms of composition, form, and color, and also reflecting on what is contemporary and what will be remembered as significant colors and forms in the beginning of our 21st century. And also, yes, of course, I want to document things that I think are important and that I'd like to focus on. During the time when I was studying, I met my boyfriend, who now became my husband. He moved to Chicago shortly after we met, so I spent almost half of my studies in Chicago, where I met this guy in the right upper corner called Lee Balterman. He was a street photographer working for Life and different other magazines. And we met at a random street corner where he asked to take my portrait. It was really a random meeting, and we started talking about photography and ended up taking on a lot of trips together with his really nice caretaker, Edwin. Lee was 86 at that time. And that also became kind of an influence, seeing what street photography can be like, searching for a good moment, even though we had different ways of doing it. But this led to my first publication in 2004 called Milwaukee Avenue, which is a neighborhood in Chicago, a whole avenue, many kilometers long, many miles long. And I walked the same street over and over again, and was also my first project where I started taking portraits of people. I did it in a different way than Lee. I actually like to ask the people if I can take their pictures first. And I like this interaction with them, the meeting, and I would like them to look into the camera, whereas he almost got into fights sometimes taking pictures of people. And it became kind of, somehow a tribute to street photography in America. And it also ended up in my first small book publication. And these are some pictures. When I make a project, one thing is taking the pictures, the other one is the presentation. So here it's presented at different festivals. But I also like to work with books. During the same time, and also being in America and reflecting on how we organize our life and our surroundings, our architecture, I started to take these pictures for the project Wandeln, which is still ongoing. I can still see pictures that fit into this series. Now it's about 60 works taken in the Western Hemisphere, and it's still developing. And it's about signs of our life. It's also maybe a certain feeling that I want to show. People are often a little bit isolated, and time stands still. Some pictures might people think sometimes they are staged. And I like to play with this, yet I don't do anything with the pictures. It's completely documentary. And most of them are taken in the States, but also in Australia and also in Europe later on. And it's somehow the images, they connect to each other and they develop new stories within a larger story of nature as a displaced and estranged object. But I like to keep the story very open, and since the series develop, new pictures come in and new stories develop, and the viewer can use the pictures for their own imagination and projection. This is kind of a homage to Botticelli, to the Venus, a woman standing there. And even the cliffs, if you can see it, the cliffs are almost like also looking at her. This is in Chicago, horses just standing around, also a little bit displaced. This is always my homage to Edward Hopper. And this is what the pictures look like when I exhibit them. I give them a matte. They have this acrylic in front, so they have a matte surface, which gives them a very calm feeling. And this is how it could look. This was an exhibition in Graz. After this, after a lot of traveling to different places, my husband and I decided to move back to Berlin, back to Germany. We wanted to be part of, or I wanted to be part of the big artist melting pot in Berlin. It was very exciting for a while. But it was also times like around the financial crisis. I spent a lot of time talking about finance and structures with my friends and hearing about Occupy Wall Street and things like this. So I became interested in spaces connected to money and finance. I lived in an area called Neukölln, which is very multicultural, and there were a lot of the small gambling dens. And since I was, I couldn't really travel. I was pregnant, so I stayed at home. But in the mornings, I went into these gambling dens, and it was a little bit like going traveling. And I was completely blown away by the interior of these places, the colors, the signs, and the symbolism of fortune. And it always showed hints of the owners, who were often Arabic or Russian. So it was always a little adventure for me to go in there. Sometimes I couldn't get in. Sometimes it was even, I felt it wasn't a place I was supposed to be at that time. And sometimes there were people I didn't really want to meet. So after a while, I stopped again. But in the beginning, it became my personal addiction, entering these secret rooms. And somehow taking me out of Berlin in its own way. And I still walk by these gambling dens, always imagining what it looks like inside. This is also a picture that is often has referrals to the Nighthawk from Edward Hopper, which I didn't think about. I didn't even think a lot about Edward Hopper at that time, but there must be something in my works that somehow relate to him. So I began to study his works after many people told me that there's something similar in them. This is how they look when they're exhibited. This was from an exhibition in Copenhagen at Peter Laut Gallery. And then another project, as you see, I like working with ongoing projects. I often, even though I think this project was closed, but now it's a reoccurring and very important issue. The Schwinden project, it's about the climate change. So I actually began photographing a lot more for this again. And it's a collection of dissolving places caused by climate change and human construction. It's coastlines that have been severely affected by erosion, but they no longer exist in the same form. Most of them are in Europe and South Europe, but also a lot in Denmark. And it's also something that I've been seeing my whole life. I can see every time we go to the summer house, the beach changes all the time. And the people also seem a little bit displaced. Still, they like to go and visit these places, and try to arrange themselves with it. So also these pictures become like connected to each other and tell small stories within the larger story of the climate change. Lately, I started to make more detailed pictures of this. So I want to combine it in some ways. Then this led me, maybe the climate change or being bored of living in Berlin. Many reasons came together, and we moved to a small island in the middle of the Baltic Sea. It's actually closer to Sweden, but it's part of Denmark. This is where I've lived the past 7 years. And this is where the project was photographed that I'm presenting at the Helsinki Festival right now. It's called Low Season. And it's photographed in the past 2 winters on Bornholm. Many different things come together in this project. First of all, I call it low season, but there's also the high season on Bornholm with the summertime and a lot of summer pictures of ice cream and people at the beach. I found there was not enough pictures of the winter time here. So I aim to document something which actually lasts more than half of the year. It becomes very dark here, and I'm a city person. I never lived in the countryside before, so it was actually very new to me, and I wondered why nobody had told me about this before I moved here. Also, the series is inspired by Twin Peaks, which I watched way too early and always triggered my imagination about also the good and the evil, but also about life in rural areas. And I live in a very small village. It's always the same 5 people walking by my house. So I began to imagine what are they doing? Who are they? So I went to take their portraits. And it's also about a personal challenge. I wanted to challenge myself being outside in this darkness and exploring the darkness because, I don't like to walk alone by myself. In the city, it's okay. Maybe there are other people around, but here there's actually nobody out there, and it can be pitch dark. So I wanted to explore this and meet the darkness in that way. And it was also more technically about researching light, artificial lights. I only used the light in the homes of the people. It was actually very, how can you say, a freedom after always trying to filter the pictures as neutral as possible. I really enjoyed working with different colors in this. I always photograph with Mamiya 7, so it's analog and very long exposure time, so people sit still for about 30 seconds. And often their faces are a little bit blurred, but their hands are often really sharp. This was a small introduction to my works. Shortly, I also wanted to tell, because I think the presentation is also part of a project. I like to exhibit the pictures, but I also like to work in book publications. Last year, I made a small zine from the publisher Another Place Press about a even smaller island than I live on. It's called Erdholmen. It's close to here. I'm working on a book publication with a low season project now with him. But I also like to make small editions of my pictures. So, yes, I think this was the presentation from me. And feel free to text if you would like to ask anything.
Jana, that was beautiful work and very elegantly presented. Do we have any questions from anybody coming? I had a question which just struck me. You said at the beginning when you were doing that Milwaukee Avenue, I guess the name of it was, that you always engage the person, that you would ask them before you took their photograph. That's unusual for street photographers. They tend to be thieves of light, as I would say. Mm-hmm. How did that occur? I mean, was that in your nature, or was that something that evolved as you worked with people on the street?
I think it was because I saw how Lee did it, and we spent quite a few days together and sat in cafes, and he kept photographing people, and it became so embarrassing sometimes because he wouldn't stop. So we got kicked out of places, and people got really angry. And I thought, I don't want to do it this way. I want to respect also that people don't like to be photographed, and I also like the viewer to have this. When they look into the camera, you get this immediate connection as a viewer. So I really like this. Like when I look into somebody's eye, but then you have the print, then it becomes like your meeting with the person. I think.
Well, it ends up being a very different image because if the subject is engaging with you, they're effectively engaging with the viewer. I think a lot of times what is powerful about street photography is that it's it's an omniscient eye. I mean, you're quite aware that the subject isn't aware of the photographer. Mm-hmm. So it's a very different approach.
Yes. in that way, it becomes my own. What is it called?
Right.
It's my own view on street photography. Maybe the mix also of the German background I come from to really stage the pictures and have the composition, but also, yeah, I really like this meeting with somebody looking into the camera as well. I mean, now with the pictures from the new project, people are kind of in their own. I mean, they still know they're photographed, but somehow they are in their own mind. So I feel almost they kind of forget after a while. They even sometimes almost fall asleep. So that's a different way.
Yeah.
And maybe I also had a woman, she almost beat me up one time because I didn't ask her,
right.
And she saw that I took her picture. Maybe that was also a traumatic experience. So I decided I will ask people from now.
Yeah, physical harm will change your approach.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Diane Arbus talked about that, where she said that she felt invincible taking people's pictures under any circumstances. You know, normally should be threatened, but if she had the camera in front of her, that somehow gave her her least personal justification for being in any, any number of situations. Yeah, I was. That's a very. I think it's an important part about photography, having that respect for the subject matter.
Actually, I'm thinking about all the pictures I took in the second series. I showed all the people on this in these pictures. They don't know they're being photographed, and it's always a little tense because I think, will they notice what's happening? So I guess it depends on the different projects. What's the best approach to which? It's also a little more nerve-wracking not asking.
I don't do it for that reason. I certainly understand the apprehension, and I'm afraid that I think we're a little running over, so we'll have to end it there. But thank you so much, Anna. It was beautiful work, and wonderful to see it and share it on this platform.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking forward to seeing.
Hi, I'm back. We're back with our next photographer, Cletus. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah.
Welcome to Helsinki.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I don't think we're running a little late on time, so I won't waste any time with the introduction. Please go ahead. Remember, the format's roughly 10 minutes of you presenting your work, telling us about it, and then we'll have 5 minutes, roughly, for any questions and answers. So it's all yours. Thanks very much for being here.
Yeah. Can you see the first, the first walk? Can you see the first picture?
Girls Struggle in Nigeria. That's what I'm looking at. Is that No, it's the title.
Yeah.
There isn't an image yet. It's a title page.
Okay, now.
Here we go. Yeah.
Good. You see, my name is Cletus Nwadike. I was born in Nigeria, 1966. And it was a terrible time because of war. So it was war when I was born in Nigeria in 66, and it affected me so much. So when I was younger, there were no pictures. So I grew up without seeing pictures of my late grandfather.
Forgive me for interrupting, but I think I need you to, I don't think you're on full screen. Can you go to I think it's the bottom right-hand corner, and click onto the little box so we get your images full screen?
You want my images? Okay, let's see if I can.
I'm trying to follow your mouse. I think it's bottom. Yeah, is that it? Are we on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it okay like this?
it now. I'm not sure. I'm,
Can you see? Hello, can you see my pictures?
undo what you just did.
Yeah. Is it okay like this?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was like saying, I was born in Nigeria, and it was war when I was born, and every picture was destroyed. So I grew up not seeing pictures. I didn't see pictures of my grandfather. My father used to tell me that I look like my grandfather, but how? I mean, how would I know? I've never seen the picture of the man. So by the age of 13, 14, I bought my first Yashica camera, and I started documenting the girls in my village. It was a wonderful time. Wonderful, wonderful time. I like to document people, to talk to them, to listen to their stories. For me, it's not about pictures, it's about stories. The stories I tell tells so much about me, because my question is, who is behind the camera? Who is giving us these images and why? I was 14 years.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you again, but we obviously want to see more of your pictures.
Okay.
And you're in control of that. Can you now like,
Yeah.
just click maybe yeah, is that the next one? Great. If you could
Yeah.
just do that every 10, 12 seconds, then we
Okay,
have a
good.
chance to see your work.
Okay, cool.
Great, thanks.
You know, it's all about who is behind the camera. For me, the most important thing is meeting people, talking to them about the faith of men, the faith of people. This work that I'm showing now is about the struggle of the Nigerian girls and women. The struggle. I don't know if you know that about 300 Nigerian girls were kidnapped from school, and 100 of them are still missing. So whenever my new work is about the fate of people, women, girls in Nigeria, their struggle. There are about 10 million young people in Nigeria that don't go to school. Most of them are girls. And I'm so disturbed. Most of these girls have never completed their primary schools. Some of them get married because they didn't go to school. They have no school to go to. They are scared because some people in Nigeria don't think that women should go to school. So my work is about meeting people, talking with them. I'm trying to describe the fate, what is happening beside me, what is happening in my own environment. This girl, I met her many times, be talking with her. She left school at the age of 12, and at the age of 15, she became a mother. At the age of 15, 16. And it is so common in Nigeria today that young people, young girls that are not allowed to go to school, they become mother. They have a family and become young girls who are children themselves become, try to build a family, and it doesn't always end up in a nice way. Very few of my pictures has been published in National Geographic, International, and in the Nordic version of National Geographic. But my aim is to tell a story. That is what I long to do. That is what I want to do. To tell the story about what is happening around. I feel pain. I feel that we have to engage more in the fate of girls and women in Nigeria, and to tell their own stories, try to present their worries. I met this girl. She left school at the age of 18. And today she's working as a call girl in Lagos. I asked her, why are you not in school? She said she don't have money to go to school. Her parents don't think it is necessary to educate women and girls. Her brothers went to school instead. And that bothers me a lot, that as a nation, Nigeria as a nation should be able to try to handle the issue with women education effectively, better. My mother was able to read and write, and that helped me a lot when I was much, much younger.
Cletus, I'm sorry. Let me just, if I may, we're running a little short of time. These are incredibly powerful portraits. They're really very moving. Obviously, I've seen the work with the festival, but hearing you talk about them, question that comes to my mind: what photographs did you see that made you want to be a photographer? There must have been some experience that you had that made you identify that you could do something very powerful with the camera, because indeed you are. Those are really very, very striking. Forgive me for using cliches, but they are engaging and very emotional, and in some cases, I wouldn't say disturbing, but these people are not living their dream, if that's a one way to put it.
Yeah, you're right. There is a guy in Mali. There's a guy in Mali who is called Malik. Do you know him? Malik Sadiq is one
I
of
don't.
the. Yeah, okay. Yeah, he is. He was taking a portrait of. He was doing a portrait of people in Mali in the 50s and the 60s. So I saw some of his images when I was like 14 years old, and I was so taken. They were so powerful. They were. But above everything, my father took us to photographers every Sunday in Nigeria. A lot of people go to photographers on Sundays.
Is it on?
Yes. Sorry.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry. We had a little technical problem. Please go ahead.
Yeah. I was explaining that in Nigeria, after the war of 60s, all pictures were destroyed. So in the 70s and 80s and 90s, most Nigerian people go to photographers on Sundays just to have their portraits taken by a professional photographer. And that, my dad did that to us too. Every Sunday after church, we go to a photographer to take a portrait. It's a kind of a tradition in the family. Like I said before, I'm not all about pictures. I'm about stories. I want to talk to people. I want to see who you are. I want to see why you have become the person you have become. For me, the camera is not the first thing. The first thing is the story.
No, that's very clear. I guess I mean, you said it better than I did. And when I tried to form my question, there's a deep narrative that comes through when I look at your pictures. It's not simply about the moment. It's not a decisive moment. There's something that's going on that has a lot more depth and width than that's the moment of exposure.
Yeah. I said before that 300 girls were kidnapped from their school in northern part of Nigeria. And 100 of these girls are still missing. So my work, I've been on this work for like 3 years, my work is dedicated to Nigerian girls and women that still long to educate their mind and their souls. You know, I want to create a work that for just for the Nigerian women because of their love for education, despite everything that has happened. And we have about 10 million people in Nigeria who don't go to school. Most of them are girls. So I want to create work. I want to bring out this issue and say, hey, Nigeria, we got a problem here.
Well, you've done remarkable work, and it certainly is, a string of narratives which I find, very moving. And obviously, I hope you continue with it. It was certainly wonderful to see it and have a moment chance to talk with you. I want to know, is there anything in particular to this audience that you maybe want to finish with, something to say in closing?
It's sometimes when I talk about this, when I talk about my work, I get so it bothers me so much when I see what is happening today in many parts of the world. When I see what is happening to women, girls, fear, frustration, prostitution. I'm so bothered by all this which is happening to the less privileged.
Well, as I said, please continue. I look forward to seeing what you do in the future. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Sir, my honor, my pleasure.
Thank you indeed.
Good night. Stick around.
Yeah.
We're back. Our last guest is from Britain. Alex, nice to see you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Good to be here, Curt. Thanks very much.
Go ahead, please. It's all yours.
Okay,
The floor is yours.
straight away.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot. Okay.
You know the format, so go ahead, please.
Sure. So hello everyone. My name's Alex McBride. I am a British photojournalist. Currently in the UK. I've been based out in East Africa since around 2017, moving around various places like Kenya, Uganda, DRC, South Sudan. I moved out of Africa sometime midway through the pandemic last year, in July last year. Soon after that, the war in Nagorno-Karabakh sprung up. For those who don't know where Nagorno-Karabakh is, it's a small enclave between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the South Caucasus. There's been a history of exchange of the land of Nagorno-Karabakh between the two countries. They've been feuding over it for decades. In the early 1990s, Armenia ceded Nagorno-Karabakh from Azerbaijan, and so since the 90s and through up until last year, it had always been internationally recognized as being part of Azerbaijan. However, it was in the control of Armenia, and it was predominantly lived in by ethnic Armenians. Basically, Azerbaijan wanted the land back, and so they started a new war in October of last year, and so I flew out there. So I flew over to Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, and then after a few days of organizing accreditation and trying to fix with the appropriate people to get into Nagorno-Karabakh, myself and several other journalists went into the city, and this is what we found. Basically, I arrived after about a couple of weeks of the war having already passed, and what we came to find were destroyed buildings everywhere. There'd been a lot of shelling coming over from Azerbaijan, and the city was inhabited still. Stepanakert, the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, was still inhabited by the people, but many of them were in hiding, many of them were displaced, many of them had their homes destroyed and were either deciding to stay and having to find new places to stay, or were evacuating over to Armenia where they could be safe. Azerbaijan didn't want to attack Armenia itself because that would be a declaration of war, essentially, and Russia's protecting Armenia, whereas it's not necessarily protecting Nagorno-Karabakh because internationally it was still recognized as being a part of Azerbaijan. So this is some of the scenes that I came to find when I initially arrived in the capital city, Stepanakert, and some of the other cities within the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave. You can see here there's a big rocket which had been fired by Azerbaijan. Not all of them actually exploded when they hit the cities, and so the streets were sort of littered with these wherever you went. Actually, this is a local guy who's taking a selfie with one of them. Here we can see hidden in one of the churches in Stepanakert the local refugee population who were basically taking shelter here. They'd just spend their entire days here. They'd be eating, sleeping, everything in these kind of bunkers and basements below the streets of the city. Something very notable about the Armenian slash Karabakh people was the fact that among Armenians there's a sense that if they don't look after themselves, then no one else is going to come to their aid. They're not a particularly rich country, and it was very much an existential crisis that they were facing. That if they don't protect themselves, then it might very well be the case that they just get wiped off the face of the planet. And so what we saw as we were documenting the crisis was that many Armenians wanted to chip in with the war effort. And so what we're seeing here are just local volunteers who happen to have some of the skill sets to be able to make things like camo clothing. Here you can see two guys helping to make and to pack a sleeping bag for the Armenian soldiers who are fighting against the Azeris. Here we can see these pictures were taken in Yerevan, here in the capital of Armenia. These are women who are helping to make netting camo netting for the Armenian soldiers. And so everyone wanted to chip in some way. There were people who were collecting food and taking it to the soldiers. Everyone wanted to help out in any way they could. And it was very notable. I mean, if you were to see, if you to compare it to, say, the US or the UK, I don't think you'd see the same kind of input from the people as in Armenia. Everyone wanted to be involved in some way, and everyone in Armenia also would know someone involved in the war, had a relative or a friend who was fighting, and so it was a very personal thing. Here we can see some of the soldiers. There was a lot of pushing to get frontline access among the journalists. There was a huge number of journalists within the city. However, the Armenian military were very hesitant in allowing journalists to go and see the action. However, they did eventually allow people to go and see it. One thing which separated this war from the 1990s war was the upgrade in technical ability. What we found was, you can see in this picture here, there's a man inspecting a drone, and these guys are inspecting the enemy front lines with cameras. And what you would find was, speaking to Armenian soldiers, that whereas they had been fighting on the front lines and facing their enemies down the barrel of a rifle in the 1990s, they now found that they could be sent to the front lines, and what they would just spend their days doing were dodging airstrikes and drone strikes, and they would never necessarily actually see their enemy. Here we can see this is a car driving through sort of very dated front lines. These front lines have been around for a long time, because showing that this dispute over this enclave has been an ongoing thing for a long time. These aren't front lines which have been dug over the course of the 44-day war of 2020. These are much older and represent a crisis which has been going on for a lot longer than just a couple of months last year. You can see more of this is Agdam, a very barren region separating Armenia and Azerbaijan. We also came to visit whilst there were many people who were choosing to flee, there were also those who decided they wanted to stay and fight and volunteer. Again, it's a sign of the volunteer attitude that the Armenians are taking to protect their own land and protect their identity, protect their sovereignty. This is a family here. This is a village called Agavno, where the villagers, they decided to actually stay in their village and fight to protect it themselves. So a lot of their family members are still around, as you can see here. I was having a conversation with this soldier here on the left-hand side, and I was asking him, "Aren't you afraid that this selfie was being taken as the mother was about to take the kids away to Armenia?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. Obviously, of course, you want to take them to safety." And he was saying, "No, it's not about their safety. It's just the fact that they can't sleep at night with the noise of the rockets and the shelling. So we just wanted to send them away to go and get a good night's sleep," which I found interesting. Very different attitude from what we might take further out in the West. Here you can see there's the women here making bread, and then these soldiers are here distributing the same locally made Armenian bread as they're holding their lines. There was obviously a lot of refugees. You can see this guy loading his trunk with ducks and geese before he's about to leave to Armenia. These were also Karabakh refugees who had just arrived on the Armenian border, about to get on a bus to Yerevan. I'd actually taken a break at this point, and I was looking for a bus to go to Yerevan, and didn't realize that I'd rocked up a few hours ahead of these refugees, not knowing they were going to come. Found this coach, which you can see on the right-hand side, and asked if it was going to Yerevan. And he said, yes, we just had to wait a couple of hours. I didn't know what we were waiting for, because the communication wasn't good enough between the two of us. He couldn't speak much English. I couldn't speak any Armenian. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I found myself sharing this bus with all of these Karabakh refugees who have been fleeing to the Armenian capital, Yerevan. So found myself on the bus with them for several hours. Here we can see the soldiers. This is Yereblur. This is graveyard in the Armenian capital Yerevan for all the soldiers who had died in the war. There were funerals every day. It was very, very sad. So you could just turn up any day and find yourself in amongst the funeral of fallen soldiers. Here you can see family paying their last respects before the soldiers buried. The women were given one location where they could pay their respects, and then but traditionally they're not allowed to go through to go and see the physical burial itself. So for these women, this was the last time they were going to have a chance to say goodbye to their relative. There's a soldier here who's paying his last respects to some of the fallen comrades. I actually took a break. I wasn't anticipating that the war would be so quick, and flew away from Armenia after a couple of weeks of being there, and then found myself there a week later. I decided to go back after a week in London because I realized the story was developing very quickly. I actually arrived on the just before Armenia had decided to, Prime Minister Pashinyan basically decided to cede victory to the Azeris. And so what I found when I arrived back in Armenia was uproar in the city, in the capital city, Yerevan. People were storming parliament. People had stormed Prime Minister's office. They were looking for answers. They were outraged at the fact that Armenia had given up so quickly, and that people had basically, the Armenian soldiers had died in vain. What had been agreed, so there was people out on the streets for several days. There was protesting, rioting, police everywhere. What we found was that, that while the police had been given a job to do and protect various buildings, they were equally upset and outraged. And so you had what you would find were women shouting at them, and you can see this guy on the left looking very ashamed of himself as he's doing his job, but clearly knows where his heart really lies and would rather be among the protesters rather than among the policemen. What had been agreed, and the reason why there's a lot of the protesting was going on was that Azerbaijan not only was going to keep the territory which they had won in battle, but they were also going to be given a bunch more territory out of Nagorno-Karabakh. And so what I did was, after spending a couple of days documenting the protesting in Yerevan, as I went back into Nagorno-Karabakh and basically went to go and see these Armenians packing up their belongings and fleeing the land, which would soon be ceded to Azerbaijan. They had a couple of days or something to get out of there, and they were terrified that even though the president Aliyev had given his word that the Armenians wouldn't be persecuted on their land, the Armenians didn't trust the Azeris at all, and so they decided to flee nonetheless to Armenia. This is a man who's paying, he's kissing his house goodbye just before he leaves his land for the last time. This is a church here where they were having Armenia actually became the first country to take on Christianity as a national religion. And so it's steeped in its heritage. And what we see here is, in a very, very old monastery, is a baptism of this young girl here taking place before the church was going to be ceded to Azerbaijan, and this wouldn't be accessible anymore to the local Armenians. These are some of the local Armenians who are saying goodbye and taking pictures near the churches before it was going to be ceded to Azerbaijan. There was also, this was scenes outside Stepanakert just before, during the aftermath of the war. This is some of the remains of the fighting which had been taking place. These are some of the bodies which were being, those were Azeri bodies which had been killed in war, and they were being handed over back to Azerbaijan. There would be a body swap taking place. Finally here, this is in the village of Karvachar. So this is another village where Azeri land, Armenian land was going to be handed over to Azerbaijan. And what the Armenians decided to do was, rather than just to hand over the land peacefully, rather than just wanting to happily give it up, they burned down their houses, burned down anything which they couldn't take with them, so that the Azeris couldn't enjoy it for themselves. Here you can see the as a young Armenian boy helping his father pack up their belongings before they were to leave. They took everything. These are seats from a local theatre, which they completely emptied, just so that the Azeris could really have nothing once they were to be given the land themselves. Another burnt home here. That's everything. I think that's more or less my time as well. So any questions? I'd be happy to take them.
No, thank you, Alex. I mean, that was
no worries.
that was very, that's unfortunately there are conflicts and tragedies all over the world. And they seem to be getting worse, not better.
Right.
No, it was a remarkable series of photographs. And that seems as if that the story is not over. I mean, forgive me for not knowing very much about that and not being able to ask you specific questions, but there are conflicts all over the world at the moment. I hadn't realized, how dire the situation was in Armenia.
Right. I mean, I think the situation between Azerbaijan and Armenia, it tends to be, there'll be the odd skirmish going on here and there. I know there's been more clashes going on this year, but it hasn't toppled into all-out war this year. But even though there's been kind of exchange of words, and I know that the president of Azerbaijan, even earlier this week, was making threats that Armenians haven't learned their lesson, and there could be more to come. But it's an ongoing problem, and it's an ongoing dispute over land, and no one can agree, who it belongs to and who it should belong to. And it depends on who you ask what the truth is and what the reality is about the situation. It's all about perspective.
Where do you see your documentation of this conflict coming to an end, or will it just be continue with the conflict as it goes on?
Well, with that particular conflict, it ended. It was a 44-day war, so it ended in November. And so, as far as I was concerned, when I left in November, that was the end of it for me. If it starts up again, who knows? Maybe I could find myself going back there. But I've moved on to other projects for now. So yeah, different work coming from me when I'll next be publishing and releasing new documentation, new work.
Well, it was again. I mean, very interesting. The three photographers: Anna, who begins as a street photographer and seems to progress into a more personal and remote, Chicago, Berlin, and then an island in the Baltic. Tells us with his observation about women and the post-conflict in Nigeria, and then Alex Yu with a ongoing conflict as it is happening. It's a remarkable group. I think before we've had some delays. It's sort of hard to say how long time we have. I was wondering if there are any questions that you might have between each other or any observations you'd like to share with us.
I was wondering, Alex, what is the situation like when you photograph? Are you by yourself, or are there many other photographers? How's the reaction of the people when you're around?
Depends on day to day. I mean, with that particular conflict, there was a very dense population of journalists in that conflict, in a very small space. And so what I find was, because I'm a freelancer, what you eventually do is you share, fixer fees and transport fees and stuff with other journalists, and so you might be moving around with a couple of other people on any given day. But my most recent project, I was the only one, and so you kind of find yourself like in the middle of it. You find I can't talk about where I've just been and what I've been doing. That will be made known at a later date. But my most recent project, I was working alone as the only international journalist in the area, and you just get you find someone who can help you out, show you around, and the reception's usually good. The reception's usually okay. People understand why you're there, and people want to tell their story as well. People want the world to know about what's happening, and it's important. It's important for people to know, because hopefully something can happen as a result of it. Some good can come out of it.
Well, I think it's, it is important that records are made, that events are documented. We don't have a history or a heritage without it.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Cletus, anything you'd like to add to the mix? Cletus, are you there? Can you hear me?
Cletus, you're on mute.
Ah, Cletus is mute. Oh, he doesn't, I guess he doesn't realize that. Well, yeah, I thank you for pointing that out, Alex. Well, I think it's hard to say because we sort of lost track in where it began, so I'm not quite sure where we should end. But I'd like to say thank you all for participating.
Thanks for having us.
It was interesting for me. If it wasn't your first time as well, you all did very well. If you hadn't noticed, I haven't done this before. But stick around because there'll be a couple more webinars coming up, and I'll be hosting a couple of them. And I want to thank everybody for you all, the three of you, for participating, but also Lara Macron for her courageous endeavor in becoming a producer on very short notice. She did a fabulous job with equipment where we were really stringing together at last minute. The festival continues on through the end of September. I would like to say to everyone, there's links there. But Anna, Alex, and Cletus, thank you all for sharing and for the work that you have done. I hope everybody took it in and appreciated it.
Thank you very much, Curt.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Look forward to meeting you at some time, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully.
That would be wonderful.
When travel's less of a pain. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still a little tight. Let's hope this variant is under control. It's anybody's guess at the moment. But I think, I guess that's it. Laura's politely waving to me like to cut. So good night, everybody, and thanks again. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your participation. Good night.